Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Unit 1 webinar today. My name is Cody Somerville, and I'm a program specialist here in the Early Childhood Education Division at TEA. My work kind of focuses on two different areas, and one of those is quality, and the other area is systems building. So I'm excited to jump into pre-K alignment with you both because it's kind of an intersection of those two areas of my work. I want to make you aware that Cassie Longoria, who's also a program specialist here in our division, who focuses on partnerships, is joining us today, and she'll be on the chat and the questions features that you see in your control panel. So if you have any technical issues or you have any questions about content, feel free to use your chat feature or your question feature, and we'll make sure to address those. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. So today we're going to start by looking at our cohort. Who's in our cohort, and also learning a little bit about where our cohort currently is when it comes to pre-K alignment. We're going to look at the survey results from the pre-program survey that you all took a few months ago. We're also going to do an overview of all of the units that we have planned so far for the year. And then we're going to jump into today's content, which is really on building administrators' knowledge and capacity to support both developmentally appropriate practices and kindergarten readiness. But before we begin, I want to cover some of the functionalities of GoToWebinar that we are going to be using. So hopefully you can see a control panel that's similar to the one that's on the slide. You can use the orange arrow to collapse or expand the menu. There's also a questions box, and you can send a question privately, or you can send it to everyone. You might also see a chat feature as well. And those are kind of the functions that you'll need for today's webinar. We will be doing some polls, but those will pop up automatically on your screen. We will also at one point be using Answer Garden. And once we get there, I will have the link available for you all to go to. So today we're going to spend a lot of time learning and thinking about developmentally appropriate practice. Developmentally appropriate practice is a framework that's grounded in research in both the fields of education and child development. And the framework outlines practices that promote young children's optimal learning and development. But before we jump too far ahead into developmentally appropriate practice, we're going to take a look at our cohort. We are one of 4 cohorts, a part of the ECE support networks. The Quality Blue group is one of 2 groups that's focusing on pre-K alignment. On our screen, you'll see the districts that are part of our cohort. We have 14 districts in our group, and the regions that we have represented are 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 15, 16, and 19. So we're covering a good chunk of the state, and our districts range greatly in size. We have some of our cohort members that they have a total of 130 students in elementary school in the entire district. And then we have districts that have over 20 elementary schools. So quite the range, both geographically and in size, represented in our group. We're now going to jump into some of the results from our survey that we did. When it comes to instructional alignment, most cohort members do not currently see alignment in both content and instructional strategies between pre-K and kindergarten. In terms of the documents that support instruction, most cohort members have a scope and sequence for pre-K and kindergarten, but do not have a vertical alignment document in place. Vertical alignment meetings are one structure that can be used to facilitate alignment. And when we look at the members in our cohort, most of our cohort members do not utilize joint pre-kindergarten and kindergarten staff meetings for the purpose of alignment. You can see here when we're looking at classroom environments that almost all cohort members have space for large group instruction, small group instruction, and individual activities within their pre-K and kindergarten classrooms. However, we can see that learning centers is an area of needed improvement within our cohort. When we look at student progress monitoring, most cohort members are assessing pre-K and kindergarten students 3 times a year. Our areas of improvement include using multi-dimensional student progress monitoring tools in both grades, using assessment data to inform instructional planning, and using student data to support alignment. Next, we're going to look here at kindergarten transitions. Most cohort members have transition activities in place that involve students, and they also have family engagement practices that ease transitions. So those first 3 areas that we need to focus on improving, which include having both pre-K and kindergarten teachers involved in the kindergarten class placement process, having a pre-kindergarten placement process that includes data from child development centers, and sharing data between our pre-K and kindergarten staff. One of the last areas that we looked at on the survey was administrators' knowledge and support. This is both administrators' knowledge of developmentally appropriate practices and administrators' abilities to support developmentally appropriate practices. You can see that it looks like most of us are at a little or a moderate amount in terms of administrators' knowledge and support. And that's really going to be the focus of today's webinar. Before we jump in, I want to share a little bit about what we will be covering this year. Today, we're going to begin the journey of pre-kindergarten and kindergarten alignment. As we progress through units, you will be given resources and supports to increase your capacity to support alignment in your district. You can see from the year at a glance that we will cover a range of topics. Alignment across pre-kindergarten and kindergarten must be holistic and not just narrowed to curriculum and instruction, as these are just 2 of the elements that support teaching and learning within early childhood. So this is our tentative plan for our 7 units. It'll take us to the middle of May. However, we might change topics based off the needs of districts and cohort members as we progress throughout the year. Here you can see our theory of change for pre-K alignment. It starts with increasing administrators' knowledge of developmentally appropriate practice, so that way they can make decisions that reflect developmentally appropriate practice. Those decisions should then lead to administrators providing supports to teachers to implement developmentally appropriate practice. And with those supports, both teachers and administrators can implement developmentally appropriate practice in both pre-K and kindergarten, which will lead to increased alignment. If we see a rise in developmentally appropriate practice in both our pre-K classrooms and our kindergarten classrooms, they will naturally lend itself to alignment. So what is leadership's role in supporting early childhood education? Administrators need to be first and foremost instructional leaders. Strong instructional leaders have the capacity to create a culture that values early learning and developmentally appropriate practice. Instructional leaders can also use the coaching cycle to drive effective teaching. And lastly, instructional leaders can create structures that support quality instruction. But we know there are many challenges faced by administrators. These include pressures to improve scores on state tests in the upper grades. Many of our campus level leaders may not have experience in the lower grades and in those early childhood years. And we also know that time is definitely a factor and a challenge being faced by administrators. And as we move through our units, we hope to provide more structures and resources to alleviate pressures, to increase knowledge, and to hopefully make your time more efficient when it comes to supporting those lower grades. We're now going to turn the rest of our webinar to focus on developmentally appropriate practice. Supporting alignment begins with administrators truly understanding developmentally appropriate practice and how it can be used as a decision-making framework. Everyone knows that there is a wide range of definitions for developmentally appropriate practice, depending on when you entered the field, how long you've been in the field, how often you engage in new research, can definitely shape what you see as developmentally appropriate practice. So on the screen, you will see a link to an answer garden, and I'm actually going to put that in the chat as well because it might be easier to access it there. Go ahead and do that. So if you can either, let's see. If you can access the link on the chat feature, and we're going to go to that answer garden. I'm going to pull it up here. And in 20 characters or less, I would like you to state what developmentally appropriate practice means. So I'm going to give everyone a little bit of time to think about that and to type in their answer. So we have some answers coming in. I'll keep refreshing. And give us about 1 more minute to type in responses. So it looks like some people might have typed their responses in the questions as well. So I'll read those out so everyone can see those. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Answer Garden. It's definitely a great technology tool that you can use in staff meetings. You could also use it in classrooms as well. So you can see that the most common answer is child-centered. We also have things like optimal learning and whole child, correct level, current needs, meeting child's needs, knowing typical development, child development. So there's a lot around development, basing it on needs of children, and also whole child. Some of the responses that we got in our questions box is suitable age and stage of individual development, also taking into consideration specific needs, and knowing what developmental stage the students are in and developmental programs that have rigor for students at that stage. So I didn't see anything that, I also see there cultural awareness. That's a big part of developmentally appropriate practice. So thank you for participating in that answer garden. It gives me a feel of kind of where we're at, and I'm happy to see we're all on the right track. So developmentally appropriate practice is a framework grounded in research that outlines practice that promotes young children's optimal learning and development. Really seeing developmentally appropriate practice as a framework rather than as kind of a checklist helps us use it to make decisions. It gives us something to base our decisions on, and also allows us not to see developmentally appropriate practice as one set of rigid practices. Just a little history about developmentally appropriate practice. The framework was established by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and it was first adopted in 1986 and has gone through 2 revisions since then and is currently under revision. We should see the new draft of developmentally appropriate practice come out hopefully in the next few months, and I believe the goal is that within the next year, the newly revised framework will be adopted by NAEYC. The framework has 3 components. It starts with the 3 core considerations of developmentally appropriate practices, has 12 principles of development and learning, and 5 guidelines for developmentally appropriate practice. The 3 core considerations are here on the screen. The first is what is known about child development and learning. So this is looking at both research in child development and early childhood education and seeing what do we know as those typical patterns of development, what do we see as kind of the standard ways of teaching and learning. But we also have to look at what is known about each child as an individual. What are their strengths? What are their needs? How do they respond to certain instructional strategies? We also have to look at what is known about the social and cultural context in which children live. This informs their experiences. It also shapes their development. We know that family and family dynamics is very critical in the life of a child and the ways that they develop, as well as their community, the resources they have access to, their cultural identities, all play a big part in how a child learns. I'm going to do a poll here. Hopefully it'll work for us. And I'm curious, which of these 3 core considerations is most commonly used when planning curriculum and instruction in your district? So hopefully you've seen the poll pop up on your screen or in your control panel. Looks like we're almost there with all of our responses. Give us about 10 more seconds to respond. Okay, so there you can see the results of our poll. So we all voted unanimously that it's that first consideration, and that's what I would expect to see. What is known about child development and learning is often what drives the decisions we make as teachers, as administrators, in deciding what curriculum and instruction will look like. In many ways, it's the easiest because you can look at just traditional patterns of development and a lot of generalized principles around learning. And it allows us to, do things similarly from year to year and not have to change a whole lot. But it is just one part of the core considerations when it comes to developmentally appropriate practice. And we do have to start thinking how we can use the other two considerations in our work. So we're now going to look at two scenarios, and we're going to do a poll for both scenarios. We'll do the first one and then we'll do the second one. So the first scenario is 4-year-olds in a pre-kindergarten class are studying oceans. The teacher has planned a variety of hands-on activities for children to explore ocean animals and their habitats. And I'm going to launch another poll. Do we think this is developmentally appropriate or not? Once again, that scenario is 4-year-olds in a pre-kindergarten class are studying oceans. The teacher has planned a variety of hands-on activities for children to explore ocean animals and their habitats. Is that developmentally appropriate or not? I'll read that one more time. I'm not sure if you can see the scenario still with the poll launched. That's 4-year-olds in a pre-kindergarten class are studying oceans. The teacher has planned a variety of hands-on activities for children to explore ocean animals and their habitats. Is this developmentally appropriate or not? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. I'm going to share those results. So an overwhelming majority thought yes, this is developmentally appropriate. And we had a small but mighty minority who thought no, this is not developmentally appropriate. Before we discuss if it is or not, we're going to go on to scenario 2. Scenario 2, children have been working in centers. The teacher gives a 5-minute warning that children will be cleaning up soon. Is this developmentally appropriate or not? I'm going to open up that poll. Children have been working in centers. The teacher gives a 5-minute warning that children will be cleaning up soon. Is this developmentally appropriate or not? I'll read it one more time for you. Children have been working in centers. The teacher gives a 5-minute warning that children will be cleaning up soon. Is this developmentally appropriate or not? Okay. Let me go ahead and close the poll. I'm going to share that. So here, kind of a mix, 42% say yes, this is developmentally appropriate, and 58% say no, it is not developmentally appropriate. Well, let's explore these two scenarios a little more. Here's some more information. So when we look at that first scenario, 4-year-old studying ocean animals, and the teacher has planned a variety of hands-on activities for children to explore ocean animals and their habitats. When we look at that at first, we could say, yes, that is developmentally appropriate. We see hands-on activities. However, that's just using one of the core considerations. That first core consideration about what is known about child development and learning. So we would know a general learning principle for pre-kindergarten students is that we want hands-on activities. But when we look at the third consideration about the social and cultural context in which these children live, we would not consider this developmentally appropriate because children live in West Texas and they've never been to an ocean. They don't have this schema in order to understand ocean animals and their habitats. Children need hands-on, real-life experiences. Hands-on alone isn't often enough for a 4-year-old to truly understand a concept. They have to see the real thing in order to learn what we're asking them to. So we would say if children out in West Texas who've never been to an ocean before are studying ocean animals, it may not be the most developmentally appropriate. When it comes to the second scenario, we do want to make sure that children are given a warning that they'll be cleaning up soon. We do know, though, however, that the concept of time is difficult for young children. So 5 minutes might be arbitrary to a child. They may not really have a concept of what that is. But also when I provide a little more information and say that children have only been given 15 minutes to work in centers, we know that that is not enough time. Children need over 30 minutes to get really into their play, into a state of play that is going to promote development and learning. A practice that might be developmentally appropriate under one set of circumstances might be developmentally inappropriate under another. It's all about context. And we have to think about all three core considerations. When deciding if a particular practice is developmentally appropriate or not, ask yourself the following three questions. Is it age appropriate? Is it appropriate for the particular children in the classroom? And is this culturally and socially appropriate? It's only when we look at all three of those answers together that we can then decide if something is developmentally appropriate or not. We're now going to dive into the 12 principles of development and learning. I'm going to give a high-level overview of these 12 principles. I would encourage you to download the Developmentally Appropriate Practice statement from NAEYC and read more in depth about these 12 principles of development and learning. I have posted the developmentally appropriate practice statement under the resource library on our cohort's webpage, but you can also go to naeyc.org and find it there. Understanding both child development and principles of learning related to early childhood help us make better decisions about the kinds of experiences we want to offer children. The first principle is that all developmental domains are important and are interrelated. The development in one area or one domain can affect development in another domain. A great example of this is I was working with a teacher, and she was having one student in kindergarten who was struggling to learn letter sounds, learn to write her name, learning sight words. And she went and did some more observations on this child and looked at other developmental domains. And she realized that this child, when walking upstairs, was leading with the same foot. So they weren't alternating feet as they walk upstairs. And that's pretty odd for a 5-year-old not to be alternating feet. Well, she made a referral. They got the child physical therapy. And as the child's gross motor skills developed more, her literacy skills also developed in tandem. And that's just to paint a picture of how development in one area can affect development in another area. The second principle is that many aspects of children's learning and development follow well-documented sequences. We know from years and years of research what skills are going to develop and in how long it takes and in what order. We can use this knowledge when we're building scopes and sequences and looking at what skills we want to be taught in what grade levels. The third principle is that development can occur at varying rates. This is what makes early childhood the most difficult years to teach. There is a wide range of skills and knowledge and behavior that we would consider to be developmentally typical of a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old. And as you've all experienced, you can walk into a classroom and have 2 5-year-olds who may appear to be developing at the same rate, but when we look deeper, they're at very different places in terms of their development. And sometimes development is going to happen really quick. Sometimes it's going to happen more slowly over a long period of time. It's often a little unpredictable about when those quick spurts of growth and development are going to happen versus those long periods of growth and development. And we see that all the time in a classroom. You might be working with a 4-year-old, and it just seems like you've been trying to get one-to-one correspondence with this 4-year-old for weeks on end, and then all of a sudden, overnight, it happens. The fourth principle of development and learning. Development and learning result from biological maturation and experience. Children need both the experiences that are going to foster development and learning, but they also need time. And that's one we often forget about. The biology plays a role in development and learning. It's not just about having healthy and supportive families and outstanding teachers who are able to design wonderful learning experiences. There is that factor that we can't control, and it is biology. The fifth principle of development and learning is early experiences have profound effects on a child's development and learning. More and more research is being done in the areas of brain development and trauma, and we know that within those first 5 years, a lot of brain growth is happening, but we also know it's very fragile. And there are many things that happen early on, whether that's abuse or neglect or the compounding effects of poverty that can affect a child's brain development. And then, unfortunately, it has later and more profound effects on a child's development and learning. The sixth principle is that development proceeds towards greater complexity, self-regulation, symbolic or representational capacities. And that one's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to keep moving us along. Principle 7, children develop best in the context of secure and positive relationships. Research shows that one secure and positive relationship is all that is needed really to have optimal development and learning. That secure and positive relationship ideally is first and foremost a family member, but often it's going to be the child's teacher. So we need to make sure that our teachers have the skills and knowledge and the self-regulation skills within themselves to provide that secure and positive relationship. The eighth principle is that social and cultural context influence development and learning. There are many great resources out there that are speaking to the differences in development based off of culture and off of social context. And I'm sorry, I was just trying to think off the top of my head some of those resources. The National Black Child Development Institute has a lot of great resources about the cultural context of development. And this doesn't mean that necessarily because of your social context or your culture, you're going to develop less or develop more, but the types of skills and the knowledge that you receive is going to be shaped by your social and cultural context. Principle 9 is that children learn in a variety of ways. And we can see this as adults, because I'm sure if you're in a room of colleagues, you all have different learning styles and different learning preferences. And it's the same for children. So as we're teaching and providing high quality learning experiences, we have to keep in mind that not all children are going to learn from the same type of experiences. Principle 10 is probably my most favorite. Play is important for developing self-regulation, language, cognition, and social competence. That's a lot of essential skills that children need to be successful in life. Play also has an incredible effect on brain development, and we know that children who are play deprived have underdeveloped brains. So we need to make sure that we're using play as a vehicle for supporting the development of skills and knowledge and fostering optimal brain development. The 11th principle of development and learning is that development and learning advance when children are challenged and have opportunities to practice. This is often an overlooked principle when it comes to developmentally appropriate practice. And many critics say, well, there's no rigor in developmentally appropriate practice. But we know that a child has to be challenged within their zone of proximal development in order for development and learning to occur. The key is finding that optimal amount of challenge and also providing multiple opportunities for children to practice new skills. The last principle of child development and learning is that children's experiences shape their motivations and approaches to learning. This relates back to social and cultural context, as well as the different experiences they have within school. So we want to make sure that children have positive experiences that help keep them curious and motivated and wanting to learn each and every day. So we're now going to pause to do a quick write. And I would appreciate it. Oh, I did not mean to exit out of that. In your questions box, so not if you see questions and chat, if you'll use the questions box, if you will answer the prompt on the screen. How can administrators' understanding of the 12 principles of child development and learning impact students? So I'll give you a few minutes to type in your answer. And I'm not going to read these out loud. This is just for me to see. I'll give you a few minutes to think on this one. I know it's not easy just to write some profound things off the top of your head, so I'll give us a few minutes here. And give us another minute or two to type in an answer in the questions box. I'm going to keep us moving along. I appreciate the answers we've gotten so far. I want to encourage you to keep thinking on that and submit something by the end of our webinar. So the last part of the developmentally appropriate practice framework is the 5 guidelines for developmentally appropriate practice. They include creating a caring community of learners, teaching to enhance development and learning, planning curriculum to achieve important goals, assessing children's development and learning, and establishing reciprocal relationships with families. We will cover each of these in far greater detail throughout the course of the program. Many of our units will be based off of these guidelines, and you can also read more about these guidelines by visiting the developmentally appropriate practice statement. So how can administrators support developmentally appropriate practice? First, they need to know what it is and start talking about it with their teachers. They can host early childhood specific staff meeting and professional development. You can engage teachers in conversations to explore the aspects of DAP. They can observe and do walkthroughs within early childhood classrooms, looking with a DAP focus. They can support teachers' development of DAP-related knowledge and skills. This could be through coaching, it can be through professional development, through PLCs, and also they can engage with staff to set goals regarding developmentally appropriate practice. So over the course of this unit, we would like you to think how you can create a plan for increasing administrators' knowledge of developmentally appropriate practice. Your guiding questions for this unit are, how can you increase administrators' knowledge of DAP in your district? This can be both campus administrators and district administrators. Also, how can administrators in your district support teachers' implementation of developmentally appropriate practice? I know some of you are working in teams within your district throughout the support network, and some might just be working on your own. But I encourage you to take time over the next week or two to really think about these questions and really start developing a plan of how you're going to increase administrators' knowledge of developmentally appropriate practice. When we have our one-on-one calls starting in a few weeks, we're going to talk about this plan. We're going to talk about what you've thought of, what things you might already have in place, and what are some actionable items that you can take within this school year. So I'm going to now kind of open it up for questions. If you have a question about today's webinar, let's see. What we will do, we're going to try to get a little fancy here, is if you will use the hand raising feature, I will unmute you so you can ask your question. So you should see in your control panel there where all the circles are under the arrow, there should be one that's the shape of a hand. And if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you so we can hear your question. Are there any questions out there about developmentally appropriate practice, about administrators' role in supporting developmentally appropriate practice? Once again, you can use the raise your hand feature, which is on the left side of your control panel. It's a circle with a hand on it. Okay, seeing no questions, I'm going to finish this out. So here are our next steps. In just a little under 2 weeks, we'll have our first PLC meeting. As a reminder, one person is invited to participate from each district. The link to register is there below. If I see that 2 people from the same district register, then I'll email you both and let you duke it out to decide who's going to join us that day. Our guiding question for that PLC is, how can increasing campus administrators' knowledge of developmentally appropriate practice foster alignment between pre-K and kindergarten? We'll also, in 2 weeks, begin our one-on-one calls per your scheduled time. And these calls will once again be guided by your progress on the action step. Today's PowerPoint you can find in 2 places. It's in the control panel under the handouts section. You can also go to our Quality Blue Group page, and it's in the resource library. I've scheduled calls with almost all of you. If you haven't filled out a Sign Up Genius to nail down your time, please do so, or email me or give me a call. There's a few of you that we've already had to reschedule, and I appreciate your flexibility on that. So it looks like a question came through. Let me... So Alan Scheimer asked us, do you see any significant changes coming to the NAYC position statement on developmentally appropriate practice? I've been asking around at NAYC to see if I can, get a sneak peek or anything, and I haven't been able to get a response from any of my friends that are working on the statement. I imagine what we will see is a greater emphasis on brain development due to just medical technology and our ability to understand brain development even greater because of the imaging technology that we have. So we'll probably see a greater emphasis on brain development and also how adverse childhood experiences affect brain development. And I imagine we will also see a greater emphasis on equity and on cultural relevance. That's just my speculations from the conversations I've been hearing within the NAYC circles that I'm a part of, but I could be completely wrong, so don't hold me to that. But that's kind of what I'm anticipating. And as soon as I hear anything, and I know they will put out a draft statement and ask for feedback, and I'll make sure to share that with you all as soon as it comes out. Okay. So I'm going to give one last opportunity to ask questions. You can use the raise your hand feature, or you can type in the questions box. Okay, doesn't look like anything else is coming in. I'll hang out a little bit after we close out, and if there's anything that you think of after we close out, you can use the raise your hand feature or the questions box, and we'll make sure to address it. So we'll see many of you on October 2nd for our PLC. Please think about that guiding question and have some thoughts ready to share regarding this. Our PLC, I want to be mostly you all sharing ideas and engaging in discussion, and very little of me talking. And then I also look forward to our first one-on-one calls. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. You should have my email. I'll give you my office phone number as well. It is 512-463-8869. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'm excited for our time together in the next few weeks. Thank you so much. We'll keep an eye on the questions box and the hand raising as well. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to write in.